You're listening to the Research Report Show
on Varsity Podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Research Report Show here on Varsity Podcasts. I'm Tinashe, and today we're joined by Vongai Munatsi, who is from the University of Cape Town doing a Master's of Arts in Clinical Psychology. Say hi, Vongai.
Hi.
Vongai, tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the research you've been doing at the University of Cape Town.
Okay, that's always very difficult, Tina, talking about yourself, but I'll get into it. As you've already said, my name is Vongai. I'm doing a Master's in Clinical Psychology, and I was working on my research on the experiences of shame for adolescents that are HIV positive, and I looked at that from Zimbabwe, because I'm from Zimbabwe.
Lovely. So you've already mentioned, there's aspects of shame and
Yes.
HIV and AIDS, the issues that are very prominent in African communities all over.
Yeah.
So maybe walk us into what was your topic and why this topic for you?
Okay. I was looking at shame particularly because it's something that we all feel. Things like embarrassment, we can talk about, because when you're slightly embarrassed, for white people, their cheeks become black, red, a bit reddish, and, you cover your face and you're thinking, oh God, this was so embarrassing. But shame is so much deeper than that, particularly when a person is HIV positive, because of sort of the social constructions that we have about acquiring HIV. So a lot of the times people look at a person who's HIV positive as having maybe been sexually promiscuous because of sort of all the social messages that we have about, scrutinize, having, multiple partners and all that stuff. So when I looked at that, I thought about what shame would do, or the impact of being embarrassed or ashamed of being HIV positive, and that how that would impact an adolescent who's sort of growing into the years of adulthood and experimenting and, finding out who they are in the world and forming an identity, so to speak.
That's already from what you're saying, it sounds like a very sensitive topic. We're talking about being ill and then also how you're identifying with your illness when you're in public. So, like any other listener, I'm sure right now, we would love to know, how did you get this research going? So who were you talking to and what kind of results were you looking for, actually going into such a topic?
Yeah, shame is very difficult to sort of find, because a lot of times we hide it. When we're embarrassed, it's easier to talk to, like I said, because it's an easier sort of emotion. But when you're ashamed, it's like, it's one emotion that makes you want to hide. When we say things like, I wish the earth would open up and swallow me up, because, you never want anybody to see it. So it's not something that people can talk about very easily. And being a psychologist, you also know that people would never own up to shame very easily. So they would say, I was embarrassed about it. But to actually say deeply, I was ashamed, it's something that you'd have to mind. So in thinking about talking about shame and HIV, I simply decided to start talking about their narratives and their lives, to say when they found out that they were HIV positive, how did they feel about that? So asked these young adolescents to tell me about the first time they found out that they were positive and how they reacted, how the nurses who tested them and even the doctors maybe who gave them the news told them about their status, and also how their family and friends responded to it, and also then from there analyze if there were any shame responses that came from the data. So
oh wow, that's a good place to start. So basically your life story, or the actual lived experiences of this diagnosis, and now you have it, now you're medicated, and to see how people are placing themselves.
Yes.
Great. So now when you attacked this topic, I assume you did it here in South Africa?
No, I did it in Zimbabwe.
Oh wow, that is great. So how many people did you need to speak with for you to feel like this was a proper sample or representation of what people are feeling about shame and HIV AIDS?
The thing is, it was a minor dissertation, really. So I spoke to 10 participants. But before that, I had done a pilot with about 5 or so, just to see if, my questions were sort of getting to bring out the kind of information that I was looking for. So maybe I should have said this before, but shame is sort of like a feeling that we have when we feel that we are being evaluated, maybe socially, and find ourselves lacking in those sort of social interactions or evaluations. So when I looked at that and I was speaking to these young women and asking them to tell me about their experiences of being HIV positive, I was basically looking for those moments where they felt evaluated by other people and felt that they were less or that they were lacking in some way, and therefore felt shame as a result of that, feeling that they were lacking in some way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, that's a good way to look at it, yeah? So then with those 10 people.
So with those 10 people, what I then did was I went into a very rich narratives about their lives to say, so when did you first find out that you were positive? What kind of family do you come from? Was it through sexual intercourse, or was it through mother-to-child transmission? Because the shame that a person would feel, and I noted that the shame that a person would feel from being HIV positive, from having sex, and from mother-to-child transmission was very different. Because then there was also the fault and the blame that came with you. You went for it, you looked for it, if it came through sexual intercourse, but there was still shame attached to being HIV positive when you got it through mother-to-child transmission, because you were the child of a parent who was promiscuous, and then it resulted in you being HIV positive.
Wow.
So even though it made it better, because a lot of them would say, at least I didn't get it. I wasn't the one who was promiscuous, and I didn't get it from my own actions. But your mom's actions, your father's actions also still
are the reason why.
You. Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember one girl saying that, if people knew and they found out that I was positive, they would know that, this has happened to the daughter of a prostitute and a prostitute. So she took on her mother's spoiled identity, and that identity became her identity. So she carried that she carries that for her life.
Wow. So clearly when people were expressing themselves, they gave you, good glimpses into their current lives. And of course, I'm sure you took into account where they were living,
yes,
the kind of people they stay around. And as you went into this, of course, you had goals and there's specific things you wanted to bring to light. Did you find those? And what are the kinds of stories, you've already given the story of this girl. What do you think our listeners would be most drawn to of the experiences you bumped into, even of how you were settling in as a researcher in these spaces?
It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, Tinashe, because I had to sit there as a researcher. And that was very difficult for me to do, particularly where I was talking to these very traumatized young women who were very sad and almost sometimes depressed because of the state that they found their lives in. And I think when I began, I spoke about adolescence and how that's such a key time. Because if you think about simple things that adolescents do, like dating and, experimenting with sex and kissing and all that stuff, and how the adolescents that I spoke to had such a difficult time with just dating and having a relationship, because they started thinking, if somebody finds out that I'm HIV positive, then I'm going to be rejected and I'm going to be dumped. Or even just thinking about kissing and thinking that you're going to pass diseases to the next person or receive stuff from the other person, and just a lack of freedom of surviving and being. And particularly when you think about identity, because you start thinking about who you are or the kind of person that you are, and all that you know is that I am HIV positive. And when you say I am HIV positive, you're actually taking on HIV has become your identity, and there is no separation, which is where there was such a difference between somebody saying I have high blood pressure, or I have cancer, or I have sugar diabetes. So a person has the disease, but they are not the disease. But where HIV was concerned for these girls, it seemed like they were the HIV. They had actually taken HIV as a persona. So if you think about some of those adverts that we have, about Scrutinize, where we depict HIV as this very ugly thing that, that is such a horrible thing to have. And imagine that being the identity that somebody sees themselves as their identity and the person that they are. So it made them feel very ashamed and want to hide. So it was very difficult for me to sit and listen to their stories and not be able to do anything as a therapist. And I remember one incident where this girl said, I hate myself and I hate God for making me like this. And I couldn't do anything to comfort her in that moment. And I felt really bad because I had to change the direction of the conversation so that we could continue interacting and so that I could gather the data that I needed, because I was there as a researcher but not as a psychologist. But it was very difficult because the mood of the interviews themselves were very hard, and they were very depressing. Even the data analysis was also very depressing because, like I said, I did my research in Zimbabwe and I had most of my interviews were in Shona, so I had to translate them into English and I had to transcribe them by myself. And listening to some of those stories as they happened, I felt like I distanced myself as a researcher, but when I was transcribing,
to have to read, do it again, re-listen to everything and write it down.
Yes, I had to relive this trauma again, and it was very painful. And I had days when I just hated my laptop and I would just close it and I would procrastinate and I would do everything else but listen to those, to those interviews and transcribe. And I would just be like, okay, I'm going to go cook or do something, clean the room, whatever. Just find something else.
To distract yourself.
To distract myself from the horrors and that I had to listen to, and the lives of these young women that were filled with shame.
And I mean, I can hear from your tone that this is something, of course it was heavy, but you intentionally walked into this space. So I guess, you've already given us a glimpse into the kind of responses, the kind of stories that are out there, but I want to know why this for you? Like, you're a clinical psychologist. You've encountered all kinds of topics, but why this, and why the interest in this kind of area of discussion, and what's your personal connection with this, if there is any, and how far can anyone go with this kind of topic?
I was, for the longest time, I've been working, with many different people, like you said, because as a psychologist, you see so many different kinds of trauma. And I remember working with adolescents that were HIV positive, and they were so depressed and very despondent about their lives. And, because it feels like HIV has sort of blocked every sort of avenue that would give them life. So because they're HIV positive, a lot of the time they're sick, so they can't really attend school as much as the other children. And HIV also impacts on their intellect neurobiologically, and their ability to actually learn is compromised. So academically they're compromised. And then socially and emotionally they're also compromised. So it felt like it was such a hopeless sort of place for them. And I wanted to find out if shame impacted on stigma. Because, stigma is one of the things that we've highlighted quite a lot, and say it keeps people that are HIV positive out of society and stops them from engaging in society. And I thought we've spoken about stigma quite a lot, but we haven't looked at shame, which I feel is the private sort of feeling that keeps you from engaging with society and with life as a whole. So stigma is what we see on the outside, where people say, you can't sit here, or you can't, we can't share cups, or we can't share things, and because you're HIV positive, you're not allowed into certain spaces. But if you were not ashamed, you would not, take on stigma as something that keeps you out of social spaces. So I felt that what was actually empowering stigma was actually the shame. So stigma would be a deeper kind of shame, which is humiliation, because now you're being humiliated by somebody for being what you are. So a lot of people that are HIV positive are then humiliated for being positive, and because they are ashamed, they then wither away and they move away and they don't participate. So I thought that was something that was important to look at, because adolescents are still growing and they're getting into adulthood. And imagine if their whole lives were governed by shame and stigma and humiliation, and they were unable to live up to their full potentials. That when life is already compromised anyway, that would be quite a huge shame. So for me, this is where I was coming from, where I've had the opportunity to meet quite a lot of them, and my heart breaks at the thought of a young life that has no hope actually for tomorrow. And what I was trying to work on is to try and understand HIV and the emotional aspects of being positive, and how they impact on a person's development, and how they impact on them, becoming who and what they want to be in the future. And if there's any way I can can actually sort of come up with anything to help them get out of that rut, so to speak.
Wow. I think you've given us a lot of heavy things to think about, because I think we all are aware of these kinds of statistics. We know, we see on TV that there are large parts of our African communities that are riddled with HIV and AIDS, and that we say these things lightly, that people are out there, they're living it. Oh my gosh, we don't take people seriously. But I think what you've kind of brought to light for us is the fact that it is quite important to understand how people are developing and dealing with the kind of identities that we put on them or that are imposed on them, and how this actually changes someone's trajectory, their plan to be who they want to be in society, the role that they want to play in the bigger community. So I'm grateful we've had this conversation. I'm sure all the listeners will take something to heart with this, and I'm sure others are wondering, like I'm wondering, so what's the next step for you? Do you intend on continuing with this kind of subject? Do you intend to study further? Are there little projects you're probably working on? And on top of that, do you do something else that other than academics? What do you do for fun? Because, you give so much, but would love to know, who is Vongai outside of the work as well?
Being a psychologist, I talk for a living. So, Tina, you might as well have to bear with me. But who's Vongai outside of the work, and what are the plans going forward? I think part of working with this is actually wanting to take this further and, doing a PhD on this and developing it further. Thinking about creating a social network for adolescents, or anyway, basically people that are living with HIV, because the shame causes them to hide. But on a social network, the only way you heal shame is actually self-exposure. So it's to try and actually create an antidote for shame that helps them to get out there and see that what they're thinking or feeling or what they're thinking would happen if they were out there might actually not be what will happen. So because I think one of the things that I learned from my research was actually that we've given, hero status, so to speak, to people or to cartoon characters like maybe the X-Men or Superman and all that stuff. And those are people that get into the ring with death and fight with death every single time, and they win. And we think they are so great, and we buy our children, bags and T-shirts and all that stuff with Superman and Spider-Man and all that stuff, because they cheat death all the time. And here are these adolescents who've been in the ring with death, and they have survived, So every single day they are facing death and they survive, So they are heroes in their own respect, but because of the shame and the labels that they have placed on themselves and that we as society have placed on them, they've stopped seeing themselves as actually the strong people that they are. So it's to actually come up with this social platform that helps them to actually come together and talk about their successes actually and their victories, and the amount of strength it takes to fight with death and win. The amount of strength it takes to take medication every single day at specific hours and not miss a dose, and be deliberate about it. I don't know how disciplined people are. If I was to try an exercise regime or even to take antibiotics, I get halfway through the course and then I throw them away.
There are people who are doing this every day
consistently at specific hours, to highlight those strengths and to highlight that capacity. There are people that have committed suicide for less, and yet, some of them have found out when they were children and they've grown up with this, that they are positive, and the challenges that come with it. They've lost parents, they've lost siblings, and they're strong and they're still going. So it's to harness those strengths and to bring them to light, that they would know that, and that they don't have to keep on hiding, but they could come out, and with their story, they can help somebody else. So a social platform, I've called it Positive Connections.
Lovely. So you've already launched this. Have you started working around this?
I'm working around it.
Okay. Positive Connections. Lovely. That is great.
Yeah. And having them on the platform, of course, it's a very different platform from all the other ones that we've had, like with Facebook and all that stuff, because of course the security has to be more, and people have to feel secure enough that their information
they can share
share and all that. So it's work in progress.
That is lovely. Innovation and good ideas. We always love hearing those kinds of stories. To end off, what do you do in your spare time? I mean, all you've told us now is how innovative you are within your research, but what do you do in your spare time?
Oh, Tina, do I have spare time? I don't think I know. I know what you mean. What's that? I'm an indoorsy sort of person, so and I think in keeping with UCT culture series, watch a lot of Grey's Anatomy.
Oh wow!
No, I think you know it's good to see other people who have lives that suck more than mine. It's always an upper, when you see how other people are doing. Basically, that's it for me. Spending time with family when I have the chance to, and
to keep the dream alive, I guess. You know exactly what you should be working on, and that is a breath of fresh air. So, Vongai, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you so much for taking this amazing time to give us a bit of insight here on the Research Report Show on the work that you're doing. And I am very aware that this is work that needs people to be working on it, and I know that this is going to be a fruitful adventure. So I wish you luck with positive connections and your PhD. And to everyone who's tuned in, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Research Report Show here on Varsity Podcast. I'm Tinashe Kushata, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
This is Varsity Podcasts.